Hello, I'm Lindy Gooden. Welcome to Leaders in Logistics webinar, Streamlining Supply Chains and Exceeding in Customer Experience, hosted in association with UiPath. Great to have you with us today. Now, customer expectations are rising everywhere, aren't they? But being customer obsessed in logistics is quite an expensive game, and that can make it difficult to compete on price. As volumes soar and deadlines tighten, the pressure is absolutely on. And today we'll be discussing how you can improve customer journeys while reducing the cost to serve. We'll also look at how to streamline supply chain operations across networks and warehouses. We'll also navigate the routes to unlocking greater agility and scalability during seasonal peaks, with practical insights on how to balance our rising expectations with our unwillingness as customers to pay more for the privilege. And we'll do it with the help of a fantastic panel of experts from across the logistics industry. Let's meet them straight away. First of all, welcome to Marcus Reckling. Marcus, how are you? And just tell us who you are and what you do.
Hello, thank you for introducing me, Lindley. My name is Marcus Reckling. I am the CEO of DHL Express in Germany. Been with the group for more than 20 years in different roles and functions. And besides that, my latest passion has been growing a moustache for the last 4 weeks, and have been quite an active ambassador for the Movember movement. Really looking forward to tomorrow morning, and then it will be gone again, luckily.
We'll miss it when it's not on you anymore, but good to see you there, Marcus. Next up, we have Rosie Bailey. Hello, Rosie.
Hi there, Lindley. So I am Rosie, and I am Commercial Director at City Sprint. So my kind of area of responsibility is much more on the business side and the customers themselves. I look after the end-to-end experience of the customers in our business. So from our marketing teams, how we attract and acquire, how we sell to our customers, how we look after them once we've got them, and also our customer service teams.
Great to have you there from your home control centre. Lovely to see you there, Rosie. Thirdly, we have Anne-Christine Lohner. Hello, Anne-Christine, how are you? Tell us who you are, what you do.
Hello, Lindley. I'm Anne-Christine Lohner, and I work for PostNord Group in the headquarters in Stockholm. And as Marcus, I also been with the group very long, around 20 years, actually. I work in the Nordic Strategy and Solutions Department as a head of analytics and automation. I just love transformation and the possibilities with data. And I think you should all dare to think a bit crazy, because everything is actually impossible if you have the data.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll hear more about that a bit later on. And last but not least, we have Sebastian Seuter. Hello, Sebastian. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Lindley, hi. It's a pleasure to be with you and the others. I'm the manufacturing lead for UiPath. That means I work with our manufacturing clients on a worldwide basis. I've been doing this in the technology sector for now 5 years. Beforehand, I did actually work in the industry. I worked for ThyssenKrupp, which is an industrial conglomerate in Germany, being responsible there for digital at a group-wide level. And beforehand, I was in manufacturing, a management consultant for more than 9 years.
Great to have you all with us. Lovely to see you there, Sebastian. Okay, well, we'll be tackling quite a few major questions in the next hour, and you may well have your own burning questions or comments for us. So we want to hear them. Do send in your question for the panel using the question box over there on the right-hand side of this page. You are the 5th person on our panel, so get in touch and we'll answer your questions later on. Really keen to hear what you have to say as well. Okay, let's get started with a quick analysis of the supply chain. First of all, Marcus, where do you think the greatest inefficiencies in supply chains lie right now?
Well, let me give a bit of an unusual answer. I think actually that the efficiency is the biggest inefficiency in the supply chain. We talk all about cost and things in there, but we do not talk about customer experience. We do not talk about resilience enough. And, at the end, 51% of the consumers say that a reliable delivery is much more important than the sheer cost of the delivery. So that tells you a clear story. And I think this is really where we can improve our supply chains, make them more customer-centric, make them more resilient.
So Marcus has already challenged us, Anne-Christine. What do you think about inefficiencies, where they are, and do you have any thoughts on Marcus's point that inefficiencies maybe we're spending too long thinking about those?
I do agree with Marcus, and I also think that one thing with the inefficiency is the hurry. We are in such a rush all the time that we do not really think about the solution, how to make it better. always. And I think also, as we are working a lot with the air in the parcels, if you think about your last delivery, maybe it was such a small, tiny content and a lot of air cushions in a big box. And we are carrying this around, in our vehicles and on the trains all around the world. And that is such a waste of resources. And I think that is also, something we all need to work on, because, we need to become more efficient, actually.
Yeah. Efficiency, Rosie, it's very interesting that efficiency actually is a way to do what you do in a more streamlined way. And we're talking today about streamlining your supply chain and the relationship with customer experience. Where do you think we need to go? What are the next steps, the stepping stones towards a more streamlined supply chain? Where do you think we should be looking at?
Sure, Lindley. I think that there are some key elements here, and I probably don't come quite so much from the technical perspective, but more from the business side. So for me, visibility is key for customers. If they can see where their products are, what's going on with their services, then they can make the right decisions to improve and streamline their supply chain. And that visibility is really, really important, and not everybody can achieve that at the moment. I also think that there are a couple of other key areas that have been really highlighted by the pandemic. I think both collaboration and partnerships have come much more to the fore than they used to be. It's not quite so much a competitive dog-eat-dog world. It's about everybody achieving the successes, especially when it comes to logistics and the current challenges we're all facing.
Yeah, so you're talking about the data, the insights. You're also talking about the partnerships. Maybe we'll come back to that in a second, and maybe I'll throw that to Ann-Christine in a second, because data is your passion as well. But Sebastian, how do you feel that companies can streamline their supply chain operations across networks and warehouses? And please feel free to reflect on what people have said so far.
Maybe two perspectives on that one. And one goes to the question of how you want to start that. And that goes back to what Markus already said. I like the idea that you want to have an exceeding experience, and for logistics experience for employees is a super important one. So one of the things that we see on how you get this started is, we had a client that really started with a very simple question. The question was, what would happen if your day would have 25 hours? So if you have one additional hour, how would that change your life, and how would that make a difference in terms of like the work that you are doing? And that's intriguing, because if you run automations, it's really bringing something to employees so that they can make a different kind of work with a different experience on that. And if you think about the what piece, it's really important that you understand, as Markus already said, so what is it that you really want to automate, and where do you go down in that supply chain game that you want to change? What we see there is like 5 areas where people go for more of like changes in streamlining supply chains. One is really, if you think about that value chain, upfront into like logistics and procurement. So that's one big piece. Then how you end-to-end connect that along the entire logistic chain that you have. And once it's within like your own operations perimeter, then you really start thinking about 2 things. That's inventory management and warehouse management. And last thing, and I guess that resonates whether you're an industrial company or a forwarding logistic company, it boils down to the assets that you have and how you move that, and play on the fleet management and how you run that fleet. And if you stitch that all together, that's where we see that like streamlining supply chains is pretty big on.
Great. So value chain, connect chain. I've got there. Inventory management, warehouse management, fleet management. Very, very important. Did I miss anything there? Is that the summary? Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Let's strip those apart for a second. I'll come back to you, Ann-Christine, if you wouldn't mind, about data and connecting up the information that you have, maybe within your chain first of all, but also there's a wider piece there. Ann-Christine, why is it important right now for everybody who is here to get efficiency through the use of data? Why is that so important right now?
It's a lot of stuff you could actually have control of if you utilize the right kind of data. The great thing with working in logistics is that you have so much data, from when the sender actually is triggering the label, someone bought something from a sender and a shipper, until you actually deliver it. The thing is, what do you do with all your data points? You could do a lot of forecasting here, and you can also be more transparent with the customer, because I think that, you know, in the first mile already, you could be even more proactive with the customer and keep them calm. Because now, I don't know how much you've been shopping last week, but I did some serious shopping now. I don't even know how many parcels I'm expecting, but if they were more proactive with the information to me, I wouldn't have to search for information. So I think it's a lot of stuff you can do actually to use the data in the right way. I think we collect more data than we need, actually.
Yeah, that does come up as a point, in that we're really not focusing on the data that would be very useful to our operations sometimes. I'll throw it to Rosie first of all, next, and then back to Sebastian in a second. But in terms of that use of data, you know, Sebastian talked about connecting the value chain, inventory management, warehouse management, fleet management. For you, fleet management must be very important. You work with partners who, and you're a vital part of that chain to allow businesses to sell their to distribute their wares. What do you think in terms of that data, the need for data, and the need to handle it better?
I think data is absolutely vital, and I do think it's always a challenge. I think it's sometimes about the interpretation of the data. So right. there's a really key and important link required between us as the logistics partner and provider and the customer, and setting those expectations clearly so that the customer can then control their own customer experience and make sure that they have their own customer journeys clearly mapped out and expectations set very well. And I think that's absolutely key. We're a very reactive business. We have to move very, very fast. We're mainly same day partner, and some customers expect from us delivery within 60 minutes of them making a booking, whereas others are perfectly happy with an end of day delivery or a next day delivery. And it's setting all of those expectations up clearly to begin with that I think is really key.
Sebastian, back to you, and then we'll go to Marcus after that. Sebastian, yeah, I mean, so that's a really good on-the-ground view of why the data is important. I suppose you cannot connect up all of these elements of your business unless you are absolutely fine-tuned, fast, and really focus on the data that's going to work for you. How can we, if we just, as a business, still have 10% that we really don't understand, how can we start to fine-tune those bits? The low-hanging fruit is one thing, but trying to get that really hard-to-reach data and connected is quite difficult.
So I'm fully there with Ann-Christine, because the thing is, there is already too much data out there, right? So what we see is, you want to get this into one place. So that's one thing that you need to focus on, because if you want to have a customer perspective that's seamless, you need to get all the customer data for an Ann-Christine together. So that's one thing that we see. And there are huge challenges on that, because it's data sitting in silos and you want to bring that together. So that's one opportunity that you have. And the other thing is, data and information is something that comes with a timestamp. So if you don't use it in that moment, it's wasted, right? Yeah. And therefore, what you want to do is get the data, run analysis on top of that, and then you run executions on that, meaning you want to execute on like real-time location data, match that to a product, match that to people, and then execute on that. And if you miss that, then the data becomes meaningless. Yeah. And last thing is, from a data perspective, it could be something moving, like a product that is being shipped. It could be a machine being stable. It could be a persona that's moving there. And you need to stitch that all together. And that's the power that you have with like automating these. You don't need like the Joes and the Blows working on that, but you can really stitch it together and do this with machines enabling your work.
Absolutely. Marcus, good to have you back with us. How do you feel digital, and digital is a very big word, a very small but very big word. How do you think digital can help all of us take advantage and manage exploding demand? Because clearly that's one thing that coronavirus has shown us, is that the demand went like that.
Yes, indeed. And sorry for what just happened, but I had a quick power outage, but was luckily able to solve the problem.
Glad to have you connected again. Good to see you again. Yeah.
So unexpected things happen in life events. So to us at DHL Express, digitization means three things, making the life of the customer easier, making the life of the employee easier, and driving efficiencies. And, especially on the first two, with digitalization, you can do a lot of things to influence customer behavior. For example, just like, I think Sebastian probably mentioned a few moments ago, but demand management can kind of avoid extreme peaks and things like that. On the other hand, of course, with digitalization, the life of our people more easily, all the pick and pack solutions, all the things we have, talk about automated navigation, automated sequencing on the last mile, things like that. But one way where I think customer and employee simplification comes together is when it's what we call on-demand delivery. So basically making the mobile phone of your customer the remote control for your delivery and being able to any second influence how and where you're getting the things delivered. So, and of course, efficiencies are also good because efficiency at the end of the day means you can process more in the same time. So I think all of that digitalization plays a big role, despite me not liking the word digitalization too much, honestly, because it's kind of the buzzword for everything. And that's why we're trying to break it into 3 dimensions.
Yeah, that's very, very welcome, actually, Marcus. Digital is such an all-encompassing term. So that's really good. Let's talk about, just for a minute, agility and scalability, particularly in networks and warehouses. How can we start to, as we are in a seasonal peak, and I'll throw it to Anne-Christine first of all, we're in a seasonal peak. How do you start to unlock agility, flexibility, and also then scale that across the business at times when demand is so high?
Mm-hmm. In PostNord, we call it that we sweat our assets. So it's not only the workers sweating, it's we collect and spread several times a day. It's 7 days a week, actually, instead of once a day earlier. We are this traditional post and logistics company, so that's how our processes works. We are a large scale company, and this is the time of the year where we perform our best. We just love this when it's large volumes. So, and there are also possibilities as, cluster logistics. You don't need to, we live in a huge country, just Sweden, and then we have all the Nordics. So you could work with direct injects for shipper who sort goods in certain, areas instead of, taking in the whole Sweden in insert and then has to go the same way out. So it's more like think out of the box when you have this large scale volume. And our mission now is that the terminals should be empty when it's Christmas. We should not have even a small parcel left in there.
Right. Good luck with that, Anne-Christine.
Thank you.
That's quite a big one. But just a quick one on innovations as well. So are there particular innovations that you like in the planning process that you think are very interesting, that perhaps have great potential that you're using?
I would say that, as I said, that we are quite good at this. What I would like is actually to become more data-driven, because we use our control tower. They are like super important for all days of the year, but they are extra important now because we need the forecasting from all customers every day to understand what's coming in. How can we be prepared for this with, the staffing, the terminals, the vehicles, all the network need to be prepared. So I would say a lot of capacity here is going to manual work. We are looking at, data in Excel spreadsheets, and I think this could be a perfect way for automation. We have all the data.
We'll stay with this for a second. Rosie, as the masters of flexibility, any ideas for us? Any innovations that you think are really useful? Just ways of working?
I think for me, it's a little bit about, or the way that we work with our customers is that the customers are clever enough to recognise when they need extra support and extra volume and extra demand from us. So we are supporting many of the logistics companies with their resourcing and their fleet in place. But the advantage of an organisation like our own is that we can be that much more flexible and that much more responsive. We're not tied to fixed routes day in, day out. We can just provide resource and drop it in to support customers as needed. So I think for us, it's about flexibility, and it's about being very responsive and very reactive to fit around the more planned work that many of the bigger organizations have to implement to get through these peaks.
Yeah. Sebastian and Marcus, I'll go to Sebastian first of all. Intelligent automation, what role does it have? How can you start to bring intelligent automation into things like optimizing your routes and wherever your fleet are? Any advice for us on that point?
Be just a quick one, because I like what Anne-Christine just told us, and the theme about like sweating assets. I really like that, because if you think and if you combine that, like you have assets, which is like a fixed kind of play, and then you have peaks coming in there. And that's one of the things where like running automations is super powerful on top of that. And one of the things that we see, like especially in like industries where peak is like a normal, so it's not a Christmas peak or an Easter peak or whatsoever, but it's the content normal, like in automotive where you have to like deliver just in time. You have these peaks where you don't want to miss out on critical spare parts, and then being able to like sweat both assets as of people, as of like machines, whatever it is. And then having automations like getting the data in place and then being able to analyze it where like critical parts are that you don't want to miss, because if you miss them, then you run into penalties. Then having that data play that we already discussed, like how you analyze the data and how you come up with recommendations. And then you support your planners, like procurement planners, logistic planners, how they understand what are the most important, the critical parts that they have to ship. And then you have something like a co-worker who is a bot that you can bring into the loop to make decisions able for like procurement and logistic planners. That's where you can truly start sweating assets.
Yeah, Marcus, what do you think about that? I mean, Sebastian's obviously highlighting that you can start to bring in the technology to fill those gaps, automate what can be automated, and then hopefully then your agents and the people on the road can really get there nice and much more efficiently. It's foresight, isn't it? It's predictive capability.
It is predictive capability, and it is integrative capability. I think we're in a lucky situation today. We have all the tools we actually need. You can do dynamic routing. You have real-time navigation. So you have forecasting models that help you and all this stuff. But I think, the next trick is going to be integrating all these capabilities so that they talk to each other, so that the dynamic routing talks to the real-time navigation, and that, maybe the system knows on this Monday it's snowing, so you need to do things differently. So I think that's where, I think the next S-curve lies in not automating these silos, but basically automating across the silo along the process.
Right. And Sebastian, does that make sense to you? It's how you join up your systems as much as it is making sure the individual efficiencies work in each department.
I like the idea that you bring all the plays together and then you can support it. Like, let's say for shipment, you need to have like import documents, custom documents, compliant reports, all these kind of things. So you bring that together and then you start making things like document processing, like intelligent and stitch it to that process. Or as I already said, you have like key assets like distribution planners, and then you enable them with like recommendations that make them more active and not proactive. And the interesting thing is, if you really think about that, you can run it across all channels, right? Yeah. And on all channels, you can bring that information together. Let's say like shipment status, where it is, and then you can start pushing out that information, like from real-time location systems. You can push it across all channels on a very automated manner, like just cross the cross-dock and being out, being on transfer and so on. And you could push that into all channels. And that's like a pretty unique opportunity that we see there, bringing that together, enabling people to run that and running this across all channels.
Absolutely. I mean, I like the example that Sebastian's taken. To give you an example, we have an RPA that probably declares around 35%, of the more simple shipments. On the other hand, we have RPAs in the customer service department that do the simple queries back to the customers where we need additional information. But today, those two RPAs are operated in different departments, and the one does its job, hands over, and then the next one does a job. If we were to combine these, and really automate the connection between the two of them, you could take a lot of extra time out of the process, and make our delivery faster and more efficient. And, we even have the name Express in our name. So, I mean, that's, I think, where the next kind of big thing will happen.
Brilliant. Okay, let's turn to the critical question of keeping the customer on side. Clearly, understanding customer needs and behaviors is a really major foundation of keeping us lots on side, and a seamless experience through omnichannel is obviously a way forward for many, although a single automated customer view does still feel slightly out of reach, but it can be done. So what steps should we take to make the customer journey more seamless? Sebastian, first of all, could you just give us a little, almost a technical idea of how we can start to make the customer journey more seamless?
Let me try to bring that together, what we already discussed, because we already tapped into all the different pillars. So I think there's like 3 pillars, and if you bring them together, that's where the opportunity is. One, we already discussed the opportunity to have the right data into place. Yeah, it could be, I don't know, you get OCR data like object character recognition with like letters, barcodes, whatever it is. So that would be one piece, data. Then you bring on top of that the analytics, including like the timestamp on that. Like we already had the examples about like real-time location information systems for parcels, and you can track them and these kind of things. And then what you always want to do is, it's meaningless until you run the actual actions on that one. And that's where you will see this gradual shift. So from it's an ad hoc kind of like reactive mode, which is not perceived of being seamless at all. And that will shift continuously. And I like the ideas that Marcus already came up with. If you have these automations already in place, then you see that shift where humans are empowered to do more. That's like one obvious next step. And then the other thing is some of them, especially like Marcus said it, like a lot of the automations already run on like the long tail, where you have like a lot of parcels going out there, low volumes and these kind of things. And that's where you can run like seamless automations that will be highly perceived by customers of adding value to them. And examples, it's not just like industrial examples, but individual examples, just a bunch of where you see that and where you have them in daily life.
You do realize, everybody, that we're in danger of coming up with a very useful a toolkit on how to do this. So thank you very much for your comments so far. Just wherever you are in the world, you're watching us live, please do send in a question to us. You can do that in the box to the right of us. We have questions coming through already, but do send us your question. You will drive the last 10 minutes of our conversation. So get in touch, whatever the question. Doesn't matter how tough it is, we'll try to answer it. We can't promise, but we'll certainly try to answer it. So get in touch. Rosie, look, there's been so much change, hasn't there, during the pandemic and before then, in terms of customer experiences, customer expectations. Where do you think the greatest progress has been made? That could be something internal in terms of the way we work, or it could be our experience. What do you think, Rosie?
So I think the B2C customer has had to shift their businesses immensely to be able to achieve the growth in demand that's come along in the last few years. And I think one of the key areas that we've seen in particular is visibility at both centralized and local level. And the most efficient customers, the customers that have seen the best benefit, have that visibility at both levels so that they can then achieve final mile solutions that are very, very localized, along with their national operations that move high volume parcels through networks at speed and pace. So for me, I think that's the biggest customer shift, and the customers that are ahead of the curve on that, there are still some that need to catch up, are really achieving great customer experience and high customer satisfaction scores in both areas, because they can achieve what their customer wants by getting the parcel to them when they actually want it.
Yeah, it's an unrivaled mobilization of people, hasn't it been, in terms of drivers in particular, getting those parcels to customers, individual customers, but also from a business perspective. And yes, we have an HGV driver problem here in the UK, and there are others across Europe, but it has been quite remarkable. But there are weaknesses, and Christine, where do you think the biggest weaknesses are as we stand?
I would say that it's still in the first and the last mile, actually, the lack of communication, because nowadays, we shop it's almost one click to shop on the internet. We want instant information, and we do not want the shipper to send us the order. Like we will pack your order and we will get back to you when we shipped it, and then it takes maybe sometimes 3 to 7 days before you hear anything. And I think this gap needs to be filled with something at least. And I think the new upcomers, they understand the need of this smooth customer journey. Tell the customer instantly that we will pick up their parcel very soon. I think traditional companies, they are more like, yeah, we will tell the customer that someone made actually a label. That's it. So I think you need to look at a smooth customer journey, like in the last mile as well. There is a lot of logistics companies try to deliver to my home address, not telling me when they will arrive. And if I'm not home, they won't leave it outside the door. And then they will make new attempts. And for a receiver, that is not a smooth customer journey.
Just one thought on that point. Again, you've mentioned it before, but the customer communication, the relationship between us, customers, and you, the carriers. What needs to be done now, do you think, in terms of increasing the communication? Because in some ways it's increasing, but it needs to be very, very targeted to when we need to know the information. So what can be done there, Ann-Christine?
I think already we have the information we need. It's more how we communicate and when we communicate.
Okay.
Because what we see is actually that a lot of customers are calling us in the first mile because they want to know, when can I expect a delivery? Yep. It's not really a question to us. It's a question to the shipper, actually. So
Marcus, Marcus, what do you think in terms of the weaknesses? First mile, last mile communication. Do you agree with that? Any other thoughts?
I see basically 3 buckets of weaknesses, and 2 of those very much relate to what we already discussed around, data is one of the keys for seamless. And when we talk data, I see 2 topics. The one is technical hurdles, simply getting the data from one system to the other. Let's stick to the good old customs example that we had before. For tens of years, we've gotten used to somebody prepares a commercial invoice or in one system, prints it on a piece of paper, puts it on a parcel. We're taking it off the parcel and keying it in again. What a nonsense, if he's got the data, pass the data over. But then you find out, okay, connecting these systems is not quite as easy as it might be. So that's number 1, but you might overcome that. And things are getting easier and easier in that. But then you've got the regulatory hurdles. If we stick in this example, we might still end up some customs regulation, some customs bodies might not yet accept electronic data. Then you again start, printing what you've got electronically and handing it over. Or another example of that would be, you're in a B2C business, your customer gives you the mobile phone number, but you're not allowed to give it to your service provider. The service provider can't use it to call the guy before he delivers, and there goes the customer experience. So, a lot of regulatory hurdles around data, and I think that's something where I truly believe need to also find a new balance between data protection, and ease of use, customer experience. And it's not just a black and white as we deal with it today. But then there is another big third hurdle, which has a totally different nature. And, let me be a bit provocative here again. The supply chain manager herself or himself is probably the third big hurdle, because many of them don't really put their money where their mouth is. They talk about customer experience, they talk about resilience, and when there's a crisis, they're big at yelling and really wanting different solutions. But then they seem to be forgetting soon, and half a year later, they'll go for the easy penny and go for a saving here, go for a saving there. And if somebody can provide a slightly cheaper solution, what do I care about resilience? What do I care about customer experience? So I think there's still, and I'm painting a black and white picture here for the purpose of the discussion, but I think there needs to be a bit of a mind shift change here as well, that supply chain is way more than cost. Quite to the contrary, it's a source of customer experience, and hence a value driver.
I can hear 10,000 supply chain managers screaming at you right now, Marcus, but I'm afraid that's an argument you'll have to have separately. Let's just look at the positives for a second. Sebastian, any examples of where automation is really transforming customer experience at the moment?
So let me bring this back to this last and first mile, because I think that's really where a lot of the breakdowns are. And then the other thing is, I like that one, that you don't put the money where your mouth is. So what we saw is that if you take an example like shipments and shipment delays, that's where you get aggravated, right? Because you don't get it in time. One of the things, if you take a look at like we had this, like Rosie came up with that B2C kind of examples where like businesses have to like reinvent themselves. If you think about the organizational setup, so they have customer success managers and they have to dig into like, can I deliver on time? For that, they need to work with like order managers. So that's already like two organizations talking to each other. And then they have to go back, let's say inventory, because you need to see whether you have something on inventory that you can ship in the first place. So it's a third organizational layer. And then maybe if you think that you can ship it with A, but B could be cheaper, then you need to think about like, what are alternatives? And if you think about 3-4 layers in a company and bringing that together, that's super complex, because you cannot instantly communicate into the last mile that shipments will be delayed. You are not investing enough into these like customer success managers to make them successful. So one of the things that we found out is if you bring that together in a way where you could say, why don't I really like rethink my process? And instead of like having like 4 layers of people working together, I get the customer success manager in the first place to wake up in the morning with a recommendation on, let's say, these are the shipments that will be delayed because I have the data. I know that I cannot deliver that on time. And here are, you don't have to dig for that, but here is like recommendations on how you can handle that. And you can pull all organizational layers up so that you can make these recommendations. And then you would see yourself being able to already like being able to come up with like suggestions on how to change that. And maybe from a seamless perspective, just with a click of a mouse, you could send to your clients a notification saying, hey, sorry, we found out there will be a delay. We are switching alternatives to delivery, and that will come with no price to you. And we apologize for that. And that's highly automated. And if you think about that, that's powerful. And that closes the last mile, and it enables the supply chain managers to really to deliver on that promise. And these are actual like client examples that we're currently working on.
Yeah, it does sound as though there's not only this seamless journey has to be internal, otherwise it cannot possibly be external and the customers can't feel it, but also then you're talking about the roles and responsibilities. We'll talk a bit more about that. It's really interesting. But there is obviously a lot of work ahead of us to streamline supply chains and improve the customer experience. But any company that can do that with agility will also have an advantage. So let's just think about how the industry can respond in an agile way and therefore drive a greater efficiency. Rosie, first of all, how do you think technology is likely to drive efficiency and transform traditional roles? Right on that point, you know, how do jobs need to change?
I think that's a really interesting point, Lindley. And I think that probably we have to be careful not to try to eat the elephant all at once with this. Mm. I think we all get very, very excited about the idea that technology is going to save lots of customer service agents from doing activities, but actually probably stepping back from that a little bit and taking one process at a time and looking at how you fix that one process and maybe only fix part of that process and make it automated or give a technology solution to it, so that actually there's an interplay between where technology helps and saves us time and efficiency and gives the customer the right outcome, along with where the human still drops back into the conversation or the activity that's going on to make sure that things are tied down and completed. I think particularly in customer service, and parcels are an emotional thing for customers. You know, they do take it quite seriously if things have gone wrong, and they like that comfort factor of a human being involved. So I think it's about using the technology to the best advantage, but still keeping the humans in play. Yeah.
And Marcus, what do you think about what the humans in play will be doing? Maybe it's interim, maybe it's further afield. What role for humans as we go forward?
Well, I mean, I think as we've said, this whole automation in our view is not there to replace humans, but very much to what Rosie just said, to make the life of the humans better, be it customers or be it employees. And hence, we've all been facing with tremendous growth over the last few years. And of course, it's been difficult to keep up with customer service and similar things. So I think really, if we can find ways to free up easy, repetitive, stupid tasks, that at the end, no human really likes to do. And where, let's face reality, we humans are usually not so good at, because we tend to make mistakes when we do repetitive tasks. That can actually build the perfect symbiosis in giving us that extra time that we need to really give the customer that human touch that Rosie was talking about when she or he really needs it. And that's where we can make it a huge difference. And that's, how we've been driving this through. And it's not only true for customer service. If you think about the last mile and the driver, I think it's going to be a long way ahead until we see automated last mile delivery vehicles driving along. But of course, there's a lot already today around navigation, around assisted driving, where these automations can make the experience much better, much more safe and much faster, and hence make the life of the driver, who is a very scarce resource these days, a lot easier. So, and this is, I think, the way to look at it, at least in our industry.
If you speak to other industries, for example, insurance, the future of work may be that humans will be dealing with the more complex issues. They'll be giving the empathetic touch. The human touch is very, very important. And Marcus, just a quick one on complaints handling. At that point, such as it would be in insurance with claims, do you need humans involved deeply at complaints, or can you automate some of that as well, do you feel?
Well, my feel is, and not only feel, we're already using RPAs for complaint handling, for the very simple, very obvious stuff where, actually you improve customer experience because within an instant, the problem is resolved. On the other hand, that gives us the time that the humans really have the time to look into detail into the more complicated complaints, and maybe the chance of giving the right answer at the first time to the customer, because you have a bit more time to look into the case, actually improves that case. So it's exactly the same thing as with the other examples that we've been just discussing.
And Christine, do you agree with that? I saw you nodding there.
Yeah, I do agree. And I want to add, because we use a lot of RPA as well, both within, different tasks in customer service, search for parcels, we do claims handling, but we also added conversational AI, because we saw that 70% of the customers calling in, they want to understand something about the delivery, something with the parcel. And, within our production data, we have everything, all the timestamps, all the scans. We know what is the next phase for, let's say, a parcel. Is it a home delivery, or what is going to happen? So we actually tried to make something smooth, and this could actually differ from country to country, because Marcus was talking about that earlier. You might not be able to use the phone number of the customer, but for us, actually, when they call in, we said that we will not ask them for any information. We'll just give them information instead. So we just take the phone number they are calling from, because in the Nordic countries, the main part of the customers, I would say more than 90%, we have the phone number, the smartphone number, to give them the notification of the parcel.
Yeah.
So they call in, we take the number, we send it into the production data. We ask, what about this parcel? And then we just, ask the customer to confirm, is it this parcel you're interested about?
Yeah.
And yes. Do you want to book a home delivery? So this is the machine doing this with the customer. Yeah. And I think it's really good, because you take away a lot of, waiting time, and a lot of, as Rosie said, that parcels, it's a lot of feelings for the customers.
Absolutely. Rosie, I'll throw something to you about collaboration. We talked about collaboration a little bit early on, and getting the value chain, getting the entire supply chain working together. What can we do next, do you think? And it could involve technology, clearly, but what do you think we should be doing right now to work together more efficiently, better? Also, I guess that means cross-border as well. What can we do together?
I think it's a really interesting point, Lindy, and I think it's being open to working with your competitors in some cases, as long as you're very careful about that, as long as you, again, back to the whole data piece, but actually to give a better customer experience. And I think we've seen a lot of that again throughout the pandemic. We deal a lot in the health sector. And one of the things that was most impressive was how companies and businesses stepped up to help and just to do their bit during the pandemic. And I think that's taught people a lot of things. And certainly in our sector, that courier companies have been working together to deliver COVID testing, to deliver PPE, and recognizing that you each have a vital role. So, for example, we're not great at the very big loads and the big stuff. That's not our specialist area, but we can be fast and agile with the smaller stuff. So it's where do we fit in a customer supply chain to make sure things work well together, and as I say, actually being prepared to work alongside of our competitors.
And being really aware of the lines that connect you to everybody else. I mean, that customer view is still really important as well. I did see when Ann-Christine, you talked about conversational AI with complaints handling and that sort of area. I saw Sebastian, you were nodding quite a lot as well. I just want to broadly talk about the technologies that really excite you, and perhaps that could be one of them, conversational AI. What excites you at the moment, Sebastian?
The interesting thing is when automations and RPA started, this was like, okay, I fixed something, machine-to-machine communication, pretty boring, pretty straightforward. Then it came something which was like attended, meaning you have co-workers that are bots. But Ann-Christine and Marcus, they brought up something which is even more powerful, because these days, companies don't want to have like automations. They want to fuse in technology and make best means of that. What do I mean by that? Let's say a customer pings you and you wouldn't even know whether that's a complaint, whether that is, hey, there was a super delivery. So you wouldn't know that. And what you can do is along that journey, so you can take that customer information and then you can bring something on top of that with just like machine learning, right? You can see and screen through, let's say you get an email and let's say you want to screen a machine, and the machine would say, out of like sentiment analysis, it would say, hey, this is a complaint where this, hey, no, he was really happy and he wants to write you that he was happy about like on-time delivery. And then what you can do is on that like process information and the actions that you want to run on top of that, you can already say, okay, this is something where there's a complaint, so I better start searching for the actual order and collect all information, so that I'm prepared to go back and react on that complaint, which is completely different whether somebody just told me, hey, I got it on time, and then you can go into organize for like archive the data, right? And then what you can do is based on the sentiment analysis, you can then bring a human into the loop, and the human can say, okay, I really aggravated someone, and that's an important client. I really need to go back on them. And then you could go back on them on a personal basis, or you could say, okay, it's something that I can fix, maybe has a little like finance implication, I need to reimburse something there, but you can automate it, right? And that's the opportunity that you have. You can go end to end with like technology being infused. You enrich the work and thereby you make repetitive work, or you take that out of the entire process, and whenever possible, you can automate it. And I guess that's the power that you have, and that like conversational AI and that context-rich AI is super important in that regard.
Before we go to audience questions, and if you are you're watching us live, so if you are watching us wherever you are in the world as we speak, send in your questions. We have lots here. We'll get to them in just a minute's time or two. But I'll throw the final question to Marcus, really, and just a broader question about data strategy. And I wonder, for those watching us today who are, really kind of bogged down, they're dug deep in how to use their data and how to really harness the data that they have already. What should we all be doing to fine-tune our data strategy, or make it more flexible, or make it more agile? How can we start to really get that mindset, that new way of working with our customers going through the business, do you think, Marcus?
Well, I think it's all about collaborative data, and I think we've touched that already, really making these data flows. Don't think in IT systems, don't think in organizations any longer, think in the way the customer looks at your process, and then make sure the data flows along with that process. And then it is about, overcoming the hurdles we've already discussed, be it technical, be it regulatory, or be it mindset hurdles that maybe obstruct you from that. But only if you think from that end, you will really add value to your customer through that data. So, it's to make a complex topic short, that would maybe be my answer.
I'm glad you did. We could talk about that for another hour, but it's been fascinating so far. I hope you've enjoyed hearing the insights from our panel. Now it's time to hear directly from you. Thanks for sending your questions in. We have quite a few here, so let's try and get through as many as we can. Now, we haven't actually seen them yet, so if we can't answer a question, we may have to adapt it or even leave it at the door. But let's hope we don't have to do that. Now then, with 4 likes so far, how are you currently dealing with HS codes, ensuring that they are correct? And what are you doing to prepare your business and its clients for the 2022 changes to global tariff codes? Wow, straight in at the top. Now, I want to throw this to, I'm going to throw it to, sorry, Rosie, are you able to?
No one for me, I'm afraid, Lindley.
All right, I'm going to throw it around the room. And if we get this could be the biggest test we've had for some time, because it's quite a technical question. Marcus, any thoughts from you?
Well, HS codes are, of course, at the core of all the customs regulatory sources. They drive the tariff schemes, they drive VAT, they drive all the other things around that, and they're exactly one of these fundamental things, of where collaborative data and the data following the process is doing the trick,
Yeah.
And, in the past, we've done all kinds of magic, customers given us something, we've worked hard to forward it as fast as possible. We've worked hard in the background to clean up all the data mess. And, we're seeing now as these data requirements by the regulatory agencies all around the world get more and more complicated, customs authorities invent words like SRDS, super reduced data set. But, when you talk about the super reduced data set to the customer, he goes like, ooh, how am I ever going to fulfill this? So then it's all about producing the correct data at the beginning. And that's exactly what we're advising to all our customers. Why on earth are you booking a bloody expensive express shipment, flying around half the world in a day, but you give us the most crap data, and then, it ends up stuck in customs for 3 or 4 days and you've paid a fortune and you don't have your shipment. So, and that's, I think, what my thoughts to the HS codes are.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Rosie, sorry to throw that at you straight away. I mean, so somebody on the panel always gets the tough ones. So I'm glad Marcus could fill in there.
I've got mine now, so you can be easy on me.
Oh, geez. That's what you think. We're standing up to the audience already, but thanks for your questions. Here we go. Let's try another one with 3 likes. Do you think that the more efficient a business becomes, there's a risk that it actually becomes more inefficient because it will take extra people, time and effort to deal with the unknowns that are increasingly arising in today's volatile, uncertain and ambiguous world? Now, earlier on in our webinar, Marcus kind of almost referred to this focus on efficiency, and you are asking that same question. I'll throw that around a little bit. Now, I'm going to throw it back to Rosie. Please tell me no again, but what are your feelings on this whole efficiency question, and that perhaps, if your business doesn't need it, this is very important. If your business doesn't actually need that focus on efficiency in the same way, that you could put people in the wrong place. You could focus your resources where they don't need to be. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with that one, Lindley. I think there is a real risk that we get too overly excited by efficiency, automation and technology. And I spoke earlier about particularly in this industry, emotion being a key factor and humans being a key factor as well. So I'm all for making things as efficient as possible, but what we need to do is really understand the customer demand and the customer needs, and not all businesses want 100% automation, and we need to bear that in mind and be quite careful about the use of it. Sprinkle it wisely, I would say.
Yeah, very good, very good.
Let me give you a personal example on that one, maybe, if I may. I'm a proud owner of a fairly new, fully electric vehicle, and ordered it last December, was supposed to be delivered mid of May, got delivered end of August, and why did it take those 3 extra months? Because one bloody chip was missing. One single chip on an almost 100,000 euros vehicle, and the chip was making the sound at low speed, so the pedestrians can hear you. And I think somebody at the beginning of the pandemic tried to be very smart and tried to save a few pennies on canceling some chip orders and not putting in a resilient supply chain. And at the end, the entire car industry is now facing a huge crisis, which is going to cost billions and more than any chip could ever cost you.
Yeah, a good example. And if anyone is offended by the language that Marcus is coming out with, I'm hopefully mostly adults watching us today. If there is somebody under 15 on their paper round, we apologise. We take it back. Otherwise, very good. Right. So let's try another one. I'm going to throw this one to Anne-Christine and then to Sebastian. Perhaps it's not actually an easy question, but let's give it a go. IT departments are constantly stretched. When is the best time to start implementation or redevelopment? Now, that obviously depends on the program and the project that you're working on. But is there a way of, in principle, Anne-Christine, mapping out when you start to deploy your IT team on new projects, perhaps using new technologies? Is there a way, a format to do it?
Interesting question, because I would say that is up to the maturity of the company actually and the IT department, because this type of development, and now Sebastian might have another opinion, but I would say that automation and analytics, all this that belongs to the business should start in the business actually, because it's about, mapping processes, transforming way of working. So it should start from, we have a problem within our business. We have pain points. We need to do stuff in a smarter, more efficient way. And I would say if it starts from IT, it might not be the result we would like in the end. So I think this is more corporate on this one.
I'm glad you said that, because one thing we haven't really talked, and Sebastian, this is true, isn't it? When you're making a decision on how to implement or what to implement, increasingly in our discussion today, it's all been about joining up those silos, making sure you understand the business and what the outcome for the customer is. So I guess that must be, rather than an IT decision, it's now a business decision, as Anne-Christine said.
A couple of answers there. So I'm fully in line with Anne-Christine. So this is not an IT discussion, because automations run in core operations. And in core operations, you are like with the bulk load of your business and your staff that you have. That's number one. Number two is what we see is, and that goes back to the question of like, should we overly be excited about efficiencies? No, we're not. And what we see is like, it's a mixture of how you set and steer your business, or how you set it up and how you steer it. Meaning, some businesses go for, and like sustainability is a good case for that, of a purpose. Yeah. So let's say you have an end-to-end green supply chain. So there might not even be savings in the beginning, but you do that because you have a purpose, right? So that's important. Next thing is, some of the businesses, they start to go from a product or a service business and they go into solutions because they think there's an upside which comes with like new revenues and new business models. So you have a totally different spin why you go there. And then obviously you still have like sweating assets and like being more efficient there. But even for that, that is not down to like replacing humans. You want to free up time, yes, but you want to do things like shorten the cycle times to delivery, these kind of things that are really truly meaningful to the business. If you bring that all up again, you need to start on where your business strategy is. Then you need to convince the people in the actual lines of business how you want to improve that. And then you come up with IT, and then you come up with, hey, if that is the business problem, that maybe I have a translation into technology and how technology can help you there. If you do it the other way around, then you have a solution, and then you look for a nail because it just happened to have a hammer, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
We've got probably 1 minute left. Let's give it a go. What happens internally when peaks have passed? Do you take stock and review, evaluate, or is there something else that you do? And it has to be a really short answer. I'm going to throw it to Marcus. I think I've given Rosie enough hard duties today. Marcus, when you've past that peak, you talked about flattening the peak and spreading it out so you can cope better. Is that what you do, or do you do something else?
Of course, we do a lot of things. The one thing is we work with our customers to incentivize them to broaden it. Of course, we have a dramatic increase in capacity that we do, and it is partly sweating the assets as we've already heard, but it's partly also simply about putting in additional people. And, I think we've said it before, there is one golden rule, especially for the peak that's now ahead of us, make sure the shop floor is clean and empty on the 24th of December, because, we don't want to have a single unhappy child without their toy.
We have 30 seconds, Sebastian.
The good thing is, and that's the game changer here, you don't turn it on and turn it off. You run it constantly. That's called like process mining, meaning there's no on and off. It's always on, and you decide when you want to go back and run the analysis on top of that. And that could be in real-time operations.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. That's all we have time for. I hope that you've enjoyed the last hour, that you've found it useful, perhaps comforting, definitely insightful. Thank you very much for sending in your questions. They were fantastic. Sorry we couldn't get to them all, but hopefully the ones we did get to were useful. If you have a couple of minutes before you leave us today, please do fill in the poll, which should be appearing on the discussion feed right now, to give us your feedback. We really value your opinion, so let us know what you thought of our discussion today. Thanks again for joining us, and thanks to our panel and also to UiPath, and we'll see you again soon. Until then, take care, all the best, see you soon.